My millionaire client thought I was just a delivery girl, until he discovered my legal genius and fell for me. Welcome back with a new real shock story. Before we start, comment and tell me which city you're watching from. At the end, don't forget to subscribe and rate it from 0 to 10. Let's enjoy the story, everyone.
The sun barely peeked over the city skyline, and I was already awake, pulling on my uniform, tying my hair back, and thinking about the long day ahead. Most people don't notice delivery girls. They barely look at us, barely see us. I was invisible most of the time, just another person moving through the crowd. But even when I felt invisible, I carried a fire inside me, a sense that I was capable of more than anyone could imagine. I just didn't know yet that the world was about to test me in ways I could never have prepared for. That day started like any other. The streets were busy, cars honking, people rushing to places I could only dream of going to. I had my list of deliveries, all familiar, all routine, or so I thought. But there was one delivery that felt different from the moment I picked it up. The package was heavy, the address foreign to me, and something about it made my stomach twist. Not in fear exactly, but in anticipation, like I knew my life was about to shift. When I arrived at the building, I paused for a moment, staring at the gleaming doors and polished windows. I took a deep breath, reminding myself that I belonged here just as much as anyone, and then I walked in. At first, nothing seemed unusual. People were moving past me, barely giving me a glance. But then I saw him. He didn't look at me at all at first, just sitting behind a massive desk with papers spread out, absorbed in whatever he was doing. He was a millionaire, someone who could command a room without saying a word. And at that moment, I was just a delivery girl, a small, almost insignificant blur crossing his office floor. I tried to ignore the weight of that judgment, the invisible wall between his world and mine. I handed him the package politely, keeping my voice calm, steady, hoping he wouldn't notice the tremor in my hands. He barely looked up. A slight smirk touched his lips, like he thought he knew everything about me in an instant. And for a second, I felt that familiar sting of being underestimated, dismissed, seen as someone unworthy of respect. But this time, it wasn't going to break me. I had learned long ago that the only way to survive was to keep moving forward, even when the world decided you weren't enough. As I turned to leave, I noticed a stack of papers left on the corner of his desk. A simple mistake, a misplaced folder. But I knew what it was. I had seen similar errors before. Small things that could create huge problems if ignored. My instincts kicked in. I stepped closer, quietly fixing the errors, rearranging the documents so that nothing would go wrong. My heart was racing, but I kept my face calm. I didn't know if anyone was watching, but I knew that this small act could make a difference. Little did I know, it would change everything. Minutes passed like hours. I tried to act natural, pretending I was just another delivery girl, but I could feel the tension in the air. Something had shifted, though I didn't yet realize it. The way he looked at me changed subtly. Curiosity replaced the smirk, though doubt lingered. I could almost hear his thoughts, the disbelief that someone so ordinary could handle something so crucial with quiet precision. And inside, I felt a mix of fear and exhilaration, because I knew I was walking on the edge of something that could either make or break me. Walking back down the hallway, I felt eyes on me, whispers brushing past like a cold wind. I ignored them, focusing on the small victories of that day, the packages delivered, the mistakes corrected, the tiny triumphs that no one would ever know. But I also knew that this was just the beginning. Something bigger was coming. Something that would test not just my skills, but my courage, my patience, and my heart. And I had no choice but to face it. because turning back was not an option. As I left the building and stepped into the bright afternoon sun, I felt a strange mix of hope and dread. I knew I had done something important, even if no one else recognized it yet. And I had a feeling, a quiet, insistent whisper in my mind, that the world I thought I understood was about to become far more complicated, far more dangerous, and far more surprising than I could have imagined. I didn't know it then, but that day would set in motion a chain of events that would change everything about my life. The very next encounter, the next challenge, would reveal a side of the world and of myself that I had never seen before. It would test every assumption I had about who I was, who I could be, and how someone like me could rise in a world that refused to notice. And I knew one thing for certain. I was not going to let anyone define me by their expectations ever again. The next few days were a blur of deliveries, whispered conversations, and stolen glances that I couldn't ignore. Every time I walked into that building, I felt the invisible weight of expectation pressing down, heavier than the boxes I carried. It was as if the world had suddenly noticed me, but not in the way I wanted. People were watching, judging, waiting to see if I would fail. And somehow, that made everything more intense, more urgent, more terrifying. I tried to focus on my work, but nothing felt ordinary anymore. Every task, every step, every interaction seemed loaded with potential consequences. One small mistake, one misstep, and it could all collapse. Yet beneath that fear, there was something else. A strange, growing confidence. I had faced doubt all my life, been underestimated countless times, but this time, it felt different. This time, the stakes were higher, but so was my determination. I wasn't just a delivery girl. I was someone capable of handling challenges no one thought I could. One afternoon, I was called to handle a delivery that seemed routine, but the moment I stepped into the office, I felt it. Tension, sharp and electric. The millionaire was there, his eyes sharper than ever, watching my every move. He didn't say much, but the way he scrutinized me made it clear. He thought he had me figured out. And maybe he did. At least at first. He assumed I was just another girl, another worker, someone who would do her job quietly and leave. He had no idea what was coming. It started with a mistake. Not mine, but one that everyone assumed I had caused. A document was missing, an important signature overlooked, a minor error that could have huge consequences. I felt the eyes of the room on me, whispers brushing past, subtle but heavy. Everyone expected me to stumble, to falter, to make excuses. I could feel the tension curling in the air, thick and suffocating. My heart raced, but I forced myself to stay calm. I couldn't afford to panic. Not now. Not ever. I took a deep breath, scanned the papers, the folders, the tiny details everyone else ignored. And then I acted. Quietly, methodically, I traced the error back to its source, corrected it, and made sure everything was in perfect order. I didn't announce it. I didn't wait for applause. I just did what needed to be done. But I could feel the shift in the room. The whispers grew quieter. Eyes widened in disbelief. And slowly, I realized something incredible. No one had expected me to succeed. And yet, I had. The days that followed were a delicate dance of attention and dismissal. Every small victory was met with skepticism. Praise was rare, judgment constant. I could feel it in every glance, every sigh, every sideways comment. People doubted me, questioned me, treated me as if I was expendable, invisible, unworthy, and yet they didn't know me. They didn't see the quiet strength I carried, the mind that worked faster than anyone imagined, the courage that refused to bend to unfair treatment. I began to understand something profound. The world would always underestimate those it didn't understand, but that didn't mean we weren't capable of changing everything. And then came the moment that tested everything I had learned about myself. A legal challenge, one that seemed impossible to navigate. The stakes were enormous, and the room was filled with people who doubted my abilities, waiting for me to fail. I felt the tension tighten around me like a vice, but deep down, I knew I could do this. I had prepared, observed, calculated, and learned from every small victory and every small defeat that had come before. This wasn't just about delivering packages anymore. It was about proving that I belonged, that I could rise, that I could be more than anyone expected. As I began to navigate the challenge, every step felt precarious, every decision critical. I could see him watching, the millionaire who had underestimated me, his eyes a mix of disbelief and intrigue. He was seeing me, not the delivery girl he assumed I was, but the person I truly was. Intelligent, capable, courageous, unafraid to take risks, and unshakable in the face of doubt. And slowly, carefully, I started to take control of the situation. Every move was precise, every action deliberate, every word measured to maximize impact. The tension in the room was almost unbearable. People leaned forward, waiting for me to falter, to stumble, to fail. But I didn't. I pressed on, navigating every obstacle, solving problems no one else could see, exposing errors and loopholes that everyone had ignored. And with each success, the disbelief grew. They had assumed I would crumble under pressure. Instead, I rose higher, showing a strength and skill they had never anticipated. By the end of the day, something had shifted. The room was silent, not out of approval, but out of shock. They hadn't expected this, and yet here I was. I had navigated every challenge, corrected every mistake, and revealed a level of talent and determination that no one could deny. And in that moment, I realized something important. It wasn't just about winning or proving myself. It was about showing the world what happens when you refuse to be underestimated, when you trust yourself even when no one else does. As I walked out of that office that evening, exhausted but exhilarated, I felt a mix of emotions: relief, pride, fear, and anticipation. I knew this was only the beginning. Bigger challenges, greater tests, and even more intense scrutiny were waiting for me. But I also knew one undeniable truth. I was no longer invisible, and no one, no matter how wealthy, powerful, or skeptical, would ever underestimate me again. The days after that first big challenge were some of the hardest I've ever faced. I thought I had proven myself, but the world had a way of testing you over and over, especially when you would be underestimated. Every day I walked into that building, I could feel the stares, the quiet doubt, the judgment, the whispers that followed me like shadows. People were watching me, analyzing my every move, waiting for a moment to catch me off guard. And yet, in that pressure, I felt more alive than ever. It wasn't just the millionaire anymore, though he was still there, observing, sometimes skeptical, sometimes curious. It was everyone around him, the people who had always assumed I couldn't handle more than a simple delivery. Every error I corrected, every small victory I achieved, seemed to shock them more than the last. It was like they had been blind all along and were only now starting to see, but unwilling to admit what they were seeing. And that disbelief, that quiet resistance to accept my abilities, made every success even more satisfying. One afternoon, a situation arose that made my heart pound so hard I thought it might burst. A critical document had gone missing, an important contract that could cause major financial loss if it wasn't found quickly. Everyone panicked, voices raised, fingers pointed, and eyes darted everywhere. All of them looked at me almost automatically, assuming I had messed something up. I felt the familiar sting of unfair blame, but I also felt something else: determination. I knew I had to act fast, not just to protect myself, but to prevent a disaster that no one else seemed capable of solving. I began retracing steps, scanning through the piles of papers, the folders, the overlooked files. My hands moved quickly, my mind working faster than I had ever realized it could. Every detail mattered. Every small clue could make the difference between disaster and success. And then I found it. A folder tucked behind a cabinet, completely unnoticed by everyone else. I held it in my hands, heart racing, knowing this small discovery would change everything. But retrieving the document was only the beginning. I had to fix the errors, ensure every contract, every signature, every clause was correct. I worked quickly, methodically, all while aware of the eyes on me, the silent judgments, the disbelief. I could feel the tension in the room, heavy and suffocating, like a storm that had been building for days. The stakes were higher than ever, and yet I didn't falter. I couldn't. I wasn't just fighting for recognition. I was proving that capability couldn't be measured by status, gender, or appearance. When I finally completed the corrections, I stepped back and took a deep breath. The room was silent. No applause, no acknowledgement, just wide eyes, a mix of disbelief and cautious admiration. The millionaire himself leaned back in his chair, studying me in a way I hadn't seen before. It wasn't just curiosity now. It was respect, tempered with astonishment. And in that moment, I realized that the battle wasn't just about this document or this task. It was about every time someone had underestimated me in my life, every time I had been dismissed, every quiet moment I had spent proving myself to no one but me. From that day on, the tension never fully disappeared. There were more challenges, more moments where I had to act fast, more situations where doubt and judgment threatened to crush me. And yet, each time, I discovered a new strength inside myself, a resilience I hadn't fully realized before. People continued to doubt me, question me, and underestimate me. But with every success, their disbelief only grew. It became almost addictive, the way I could quietly prove them wrong, step by step, challenge by challenge. But the real turning point came during a particularly high-stakes legal review. The stakes were massive. The room packed with senior executives and advisors who didn't even think I belonged there. I could feel the skepticism radiating off every person, the assumption that I was just a delivery girl, out of place, out of depth. And yet, I knew I could handle it. And I had prepared for this moment without even knowing it. Every mistake I had corrected, every challenge I had faced, every ounce of determination I had gathered had led to this. I walked in with calm precision, documents in hand, mind racing, heart steady. I began addressing the errors and inconsistencies with clarity and confidence, explaining the solutions in a way that no one could ignore. The room grew quieter with each point I made, disbelief slowly turning into acknowledgement. The energy shifted, subtly at first, then more noticeably. People began to realize that the delivery girl they had dismissed was not only competent, but brilliant. She had intelligence, skill, and courage in ways no one had predicted. By the end of that day, something had fundamentally changed. The whispers, the skepticism, the disbelief, they were still there, but they were different now. They were tinged with respect, awe, and a hint of fear. Fear that someone they had ignored for so long had proven them wrong in ways they could not undo. And in that moment, I understood that the world would continue to doubt people like me. But I had discovered the power to rise above it, to show the world what could happen when you refused to be invisible. And yet, even with that victory, I knew this was only the beginning. Bigger challenges, higher stakes, and more skepticism were waiting. I also realized that my actions were not just about proving myself. They were about showing the world that talent, courage, and brilliance often hide in places no one expects. And if you look closely, you might find that the person you underestimated could be the one who changes everything. The day of the biggest challenge of my life arrived, and I felt it in my bones before I even walked through the doors. The building, the office, the very air seemed heavier than usual, charged with tension that made my chest tighten. Everyone knew this wasn't just another day. A single misstep could undo everything I had fought for, and I could see it in their eyes. Skepticism, doubt, impatience. Even the millionaire watched differently now, leaning back in his chair, studying me with a mixture of disbelief and curiosity that made my pulse quicken. I held my papers tightly, feeling their weight, not just the physical heft, but the responsibility they carried. I had worked hard for this moment, prepared for it in ways no one could imagine, yet the fear was still there, raw and intense. One wrong move, one word misspoken, and the years of being underestimated could come crashing down. But deep inside, I knew I had something no one else could take away. Focus, courage, and the certainty that I belonged here just as much as anyone. The problem was enormous. A legal review that had the potential to ruin deals, finances, and reputations. Everyone else in the room seemed frozen, waiting for someone qualified to take charge. And when I stepped forward, a hush fell over the space. I could almost feel their thoughts. This delivery girl, she can't handle this. She's out of her depth. And that assumption, that disbelief, was exactly what pushed me forward. I began methodically, carefully, pointing out every error no one else had noticed, tracing each misstep back to its source, explaining solutions with clarity and confidence. My heart raced, but my voice stayed steady. I could see their faces change, slowly, as shock replaced doubt. They weren't expecting this. No one had expected me to have the knowledge, the skill, the courage to navigate such a high-stakes situation flawlessly. And yet, here I was, proving them wrong, step by step, point by point. The millionaire leaned forward, eyes widening slightly, realization dawning on him. He had underestimated me from the very first moment, assuming I was ordinary, incapable, invisible. And now, in the span of a few minutes, I had shown him, and everyone else in that room, that I was anything but ordinary. I wasn't just compete, no. I was brilliant, precise, unshakable, and fearless. Each correction, each observation, each solution I presented was like a small hammer, shattering the assumptions stacked against me. And then it happened, the moment that defined everything. A particularly complicated clause, one that had stumped the executives for days, came to me in a flash. I traced the logic, saw the hidden loopholes, and presented a solution that no one had considered. The room fell silent. Every pair of eyes fixed on me, disbelief etched into every face. Even he couldn't hide the astonishment, the realization that he had judged me wrongly, underestimated me, and completely misread my abilities. It was intense, almost unbearable. My hands shook slightly as I handed over the final corrected documents, my mind racing faster than ever. The stakes, the fear, the disbelief, it all felt like a storm swirling around me. And in that moment, I knew that what I had done wasn't just about proving myself. It was about challenging the very way the world judged people like me. Every assumption, every stereotype, every dismissal crumbled beneath the weight of my actions. When I finished, there was silence again. Not the quiet of approval, but the stunned stillness of people realizing that everything they had assumed about me was wrong. Slowly, the tension in the room began to shift, just slightly at first, then more noticeably. Respect began to creep in alongside disbelief. The whispering eyes and quiet judgments transformed into nods of acknowledgement, though still tinged with shock. And in that shift, I felt something incredible. Not pride, not arrogance, but the profound understanding that I had risen above every limitation imposed on me. I looked around the room and caught his gaze. The millionaire who had underestimated me from the start. There was something in his eyes I hadn't seen before. A recognition of not just what I had done, but who I was. And in that moment, I realized that my success wasn't just about a document or a task. It was about proving that courage, intelligence, and determination could not be ignored, dismissed, or underestimated. I had forced the world to see me, truly see me, and it was both exhilarating and terrifying. But the climax wasn't just in the recognition, it was in the moment of truth. Everyone waited, holding their breath, knowing that this was a turning point. And as I stepped back, heart pounding, I understood something profound. No matter how invisible someone may seem, no matter how overlooked or underestimated, the right combination of courage, skill, and determination could change everything. Even the world itself could be forced to take notice. That day ended, not with applause, not with celebration, but with the kind of silent awe that hits deep into your chest. I had faced the storm, navigated the impossible, and come out not just unscathed, but transformed. And as I left the room, exhausted but exhilarated, I couldn't help but wonder, how many people like me are underestimated every day? How many hidden talents go unnoticed because the world refuses to see them? And I knew, in that moment, that my journey was far from over. What I had accomplished was not the end. It was a beginning. The world had finally seen me, but it had also seen what countless others like me were capable of, if given the chance. And the thought of what came next, the challenges, the skepticism, the opportunities, made my heart race with a mixture of fear and excitement. After that day, everything felt different. The office, the people, even the millionaire himself. They no longer saw me as just a delivery girl. I could feel the change, subtle at first, in the way conversations unfolded, the way eyes lingered on me a fraction longer, the quiet acknowledgement that I had proven myself in ways no one expected. But more than anything, I felt it inside me, the unshakable knowledge that I belonged, that I was capable, and that I could rise above every expectation placed on me. It wasn't an easy transformation. Even after proving my abilities, there were whispers, doubts, and skeptical glances. Some people still assumed I had been lucky, that this one success was an anomaly. But I knew better. I had worked, observed, calculated, and persevered through every challenge, every misjudgment, every moment of being overlooked. This wasn't luck. It was skill, courage, and determination. And now, the world had finally been forced to see it. For him, the millionaire, I could see the change too. The first day he had barely noticed me, assuming I was ordinary, predictable, someone who would fade into the background. Now, he studied me with something closer to respect, curiosity, and even admiration. I could tell he realized that appearances, status, and assumptions had no real power over someone who was quietly brilliant, capable, and unafraid. I had challenged the world's expectations, and in doing so, I had also challenged his. But the story goes beyond my personal victory. It reflects something far larger. The countless people, especially women, often overlooked, underestimated, or dismissed, simply because the world refuses to notice their talents. Every day, people face prejudice, subtle discrimination, or outright dismissal. Their brilliance remains hidden, not because it isn't there, but because the world hasn't been willing to see it. My journey was a small glimpse of what happens when someone refuses to be invisible, refuses to accept the limits imposed on them by others, and fights to show their true abilities. I think about that a lot now. How many people's potential goes unnoticed every day? How many extraordinary skills, intelligence, and courage are quietly hidden behind as assumptions, stereotypes, and ignorance? My story could have ended in failure, in dismissal, in invisibility, just like so many others, but it didn't. And that's what makes it important. Not because I succeeded, but because it's a reminder of what can happen when someone refuses to be underestimated, refuses to be silenced, refuses to be invisible. I also realized something else. My story isn't just about me. It's about every person who has been overlooked, undervalued, or dismissed. It's about the quiet fight, the inner strength, and the courage to stand tall, even when the world doubts you. And it's about the ripple effect. When one person rises, they force others to take notice, to reassess assumptions, and perhaps even to question their own biases. That one victory can inspire countless others, showing that courage and talent can overcome even the most entrenched skepticism. And yes, my life changed in tangible ways after that challenge. Doors that had once been closed opened, opportunities arrived that had seemed impossible, and people began to see me differently. But more than that, something inside me shifted. I no longer measured myself by what others assumed about me. I measured myself by my own courage, my own skill, and my own determination. I learned that the world may underestimate you, judge you, or doubt you. But that doesn't determine who you are or what you can achieve. Even now, I think back to those first days, the nervous mornings, the whispered judgments, the impossible challenges. And I smile because I see how far I've come. But I also remember the fear, the frustration, the moments of doubt that felt unbearable at the time. They were part of the journey. They were the moments that forced me to rise, to push harder, to prove not just to the world, but to myself that I belonged. So I leave you with this. Look around you. Notice the people who are underestimated, dismissed, or overlooked. You may not see their brilliance at first glance, but it's there, quietly waiting. And if you are one of those people, someone who has been overlooked, underestimated, or dismissed, know this. Your strength, your talent, and your courage can change everything. The world may not notice at first, but it will, eventually. And when it does, you'll know that every challenge, every doubt, every moment of being underestimated was worth it. Because in the end, it's not about proving the world wrong, it's about proving yourself right. And the question that lingers, even now, is simple. How many hidden geniuses are out there, waiting for the chance to show the world who they really are? And what could happen if we finally started paying attention?